Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to my session. My name is Jen Rothman. I'm the executive and founding director of an organization called the Yellow Farmhouse Education Center. We are just approaching 5 years old. Oh, is it working now? This one. Okay. Okay. And the presentation I want to present today was about partnerships. Just to give a little background on myself and sort of like how I came to this position, I'm a museum educator by training. I was an environmental studies major, really liked the idea of becoming a teacher, but I didn't want to teach in a formal setting. And so I began to work in museums and aquariums actually, and then studied museum education and realized what I really loved was sort of the process of education more so than the topic that I was teaching. And so really started thinking about how do I teach best and how do people learn and how can I connect with people? And when I moved to New York after receiving my degree, I started working at a botanical garden and found that working with plants was a really easy way to connect with people in nature. There was just an openness that existed. And then we did an exhibit called Edible Academy, and we started teaching about food. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, this is so easy. Everybody can connect to food. It was just the most easy way to have that sort of aha moment. And so I started to, and I guess I had realized at that time that I was very into cooking and gardening, but hadn't really worked on a farm before. I then pursued a position at Stone Barn Center for Food and Agriculture, which is a farm in Tarrytown, New York. In the 4 years that I was there, just learned a tremendous amount about the way that we connect with food and how food can be an entree to so many different conversations and topics. And then when I moved to where I am now in Stonington, Connecticut, it's in southeastern Connecticut, just on the border of Connecticut and Rhode Island. I wasn't working, visited a farm there called Stone Acres Farm and started teaching classes. And the owners of that farm asked if I would start a nonprofit. And so that's how I came to found the Yellow Farmhouse Education Center, which I'll tell you a little bit about. But this program is about partnerships, because what I found and what was kind of interesting to me, having been at an organization, the New York Botanical Garden, for many years, it was a 100-plus-year-old organization. Everything had systems, and we knew how to do everything. You just followed the rules and you built your programs that way. And then even at Stone Barn Center, it was sort of an organization that had been there for some time. But starting something from scratch, I realized I needed to build partnerships. And so the entire model of our organization is born out of what I think are really good partnerships that have come with some mistakes and some things I've learned along the way. So that's what I was hoping to share. I don't think this is going to work. I don't know if anybody's used Mentimeter for, I think you can probably enter it, but I'm not sure if you can see the, I can't click on the link to show you what the responses are, unfortunately. So maybe we can just kind of call out what words you associate with partnership. When you think of a partnership, what are some words that that you trust?
Collaborate. Yep.
Collaborate, that was one I had first. Equal. Help. Innovation. Exchange. Energy. Reach.
Connect.
Sorry, I hear connect, but I hear yours and I can't hear it. Yeah.
I said connect.
Oh, connect. Somebody said something else. In kind. Sorry, it was for you. Yeah, in kind. Yeah. Capacity building, which is huge. Absolutely. Yeah, all amazing. Connection, innovation, absolutely. And so the first partnership that exists for the Yellow Farmhouse Education Center, I should mention, we are a nonprofit. We do food and farm-based education on the farm. And so we lease space, that little yellow farmhouse in the sort of middle right, which is where our name comes from, Yellow Farmhouse Education Center, from a farm called Stone Acres Farm. They are a for-profit LLC. And I was asked to start the nonprofit there, but as I began it, really wanted to make sure we were our own organization. And in fact, our bylaws state that our business cannot benefit just this farm. That would be inappropriate anyways in any sort of a nonprofit setup. But that's built into our bylaws, and it was very clear with the Stone Acres team that we would be an education center. We lease the space from the farm, so we pay rent to use that space. They are a for-profit entity. They struggle as a small farm to survive, so that piece of it is important. We buy all of the produce that we use for our programs. We buy it wholesale, but I don't take anything from that farm. There's an even exchange in all of the ways that we work together. Even just to showcase to our to those that are visiting us for education programs, that this farm is a farm that we respect and we honor what they're doing, and we want to make sure we're acting appropriately as a partner and we're not sort of taking advantage of our side of the partnership. As part of our lease, we can use the entire campus as our education center. So it's a pretty great setup for us in terms of space. Their farm is 68 acres. It's about 7 or 8 acres in production, mostly vegetables, raising chickens for eggs. And then they also do weddings and events and dinners is their other sort of main source of income. And they have a farm stand that's open 7 days a week. That's directly across the path from the yellow farmhouse. There's just some signage. They do a CSA as well. And these are all areas where, as an education nonprofit, that we can engage and work with the yellow farmhouse. And then there's a close-up of the yellow farmhouse. I'm putting up our mission here because there are a couple words that are sort of key in there when I think about partnerships, and it was the mission statement itself was very much part of thinking about what sort of ethos I wanted to create. So connect is a huge word for us in their mission. And I get pushback even from my board on that. And like, I don't really understand what that means. I was like, that has to be the most important part of our mission is connection. So we use culinary and farm-based education to connect people to each other and to where their food comes from, so we can cultivate a shared commitment to supporting a local sustainable food system, accessible and affordable to all. You know, those 3 bullets that we are convening stakeholders for a meaningful exchange. So that word exchange, I think, builds into partnership. The second bullet includes the word partnership, forges partnerships with area schools. And then that third bullet that we're learning together, that very much this is a collaborative process. For just a second to sort of delve a little deeper into our mission, the dandelion was as our logo, was something we came out of sort of building what our organization would teach about. And so we use the dandelion as this example of how we can just change the way people think about their food. If we use the dandelion as an example, at least in the United States, it's the first thing you see when you go into Home Depot or Lowe's. It's like, kill your dandelions, use this to kill your dandelions. And as we know, dandelions are an amazing plant that has tremendous value as first food source for bees. And I don't need to share with this audience why dandelions are so important. But if you explain that to people in about 30 seconds, I notice people have sort of a shift in thinking about at least this plant. And if we can do it with this plant, we can do it with other plants as well and create a deeper appreciation. So the work that we do includes field trips with schools, kids through high school, drop off family or kids programs on the farm with direct experience on the farm, harvesting and cooking, tasting from the vine. We don't always pay for every little tomato that we take for a taste, but I will let them know how many kids we have coming. Actually, at Stone Barn Center, I remember the farmer there saying like, yeah, no problem. You can bring school groups out there. There's plenty of tomatoes, or I know it wasn't tomatoes, it was snap peas. And we just like wiped them out of snap peas. But it was like a poor communication. There was an example of a mistake. I was like, we have school groups coming. Can we taste something? Yes, taste the snap peas. I took that as full liberty to go taste the snap peas. And we had hundreds of kids that week. So there was an example. Later on, we ended up in that case, we ended up buying or paying like a lease on a bed. And that bed changed every couple of weeks, but we just paid, I think it was like $80 a month to buy a bed. And that just kind of filled in for whatever we were taking. And then it was a lot of communication about what we could taste or not taste. Story time and intergenerational programming, and then cooking classes. When we, This is in the farmhouse, yes. Yeah, it's a small space. It's one of the things we need to shift is probably building a larger space at some point. We switched to virtual when we, obviously as everybody did. And so we started doing Facebook Live streams. We said we would do them every day for the first 2 weeks during shutdown, and it turned into every day for 3 months. We did cooking demonstrations and live stream to our Facebook page. And it was a quick study in how to do virtual programming. And it was because we had all these really great connections with our families that we worked with. We had a really great audience. We also try to sort of think outside the box in terms of the ways that people can experience the farm. And so especially during the pandemic, a lot of programming that people could do on their own, like plein air painting. Okay, so one of the first big areas of partnership is our teacher professional development. So this is a big program area for us. We do training for mostly high school teachers and almost entirely high school family and consumer science teachers. So these are the home ec teachers that, at least when I went to school, they were called home ec teachers. They taught culinary. They are an amazing group of teachers. There's about 500 in the state of Connecticut. So it's not this huge audience, at least in our state, that we can reach, who are teaching about cooking to high school kids who are about to become independent purchasers of food and cooking on their own. And they can incorporate all this content about food justice and food access and how our food is grown and soil health and regenerative ag into their curriculum, because their standards are kind of wide open and they're eager. But this partnership really started with a walk on the farm, which is, I think, if I were to give one piece of advice, go for lots of walks with people. The best ideas start there. I had a walk with a teacher who was not a culinary teacher who said, oh, my high school, the culinary teachers never have training. Have you ever done anything for them? And so it was this idea that was planted, and we ended up building this program with teachers. We got a small grant last year. We started doing trainings for culinary teachers, 25 people at a time. When things went virtual, we started doing, welcoming teachers from farther afield, out of state even, who would come to our virtual professional development. We heard a need from those teachers that they wanted more, and they wanted lesson plans and curriculum. And so we got a small grant to pay for an advisory team. So that funding went entirely to pay for partners to help us think about what they needed. So for an entire year, we had a retreat. And from that, we are now building a website for culinary teachers that will be all encompassing for, a 6-month or a 6-week unit to a full year curriculum, networking opportunities, resources. And that received funding from the USDA this year. We just got our first federal grant to support that, a farm to school grant, which is amazing for this tiny organization, which is me and 2 other people. And now we have to build this whole website, but it started from this walk, from this conversation, from hearing what a partner needed. Teachers needed these lessons. And then from starting with funding that just got that information from teachers, that was just about making sure we're building something in partnership with these teachers. This was a barn raiser that we did with a group of teachers. Same question we ask our farmers whenever we have people visit the farm: what do you need us to do? Is there something? And I don't want these sort of fake experiences. I want them to be authentic. And the farmer that day said, well, I built all these ribs, but I just can't, and I never have the time to carry them out to the field. I had 25 teachers, we carried them all out to the field. We built a barn that afternoon. This is the workshop that we did last summer with teachers to start getting at that question of what does our partnership look like. We went virtual with our training as well, like I mentioned, and this is an example of how that experience with the live streaming to Facebook really helped support our work with live streaming for teachers. We actually live stream now instead of to Facebook. We live stream to a YouTube link. We use StreamYard and live stream so that when you get your link to watch, you can watch it at any point. It's just automatically live. Okay, so the next program I want to talk about, and please stop me if there are any questions. And again, I'm trying to speak more sort of like how we think about partnerships and hopefully these apply to some of the work that you might do or as you think about expanding partnerships. So we started during the pandemic, we heard a need from farmers who had lost their wholesale accounts, that they didn't have any place to sell their product, especially in Northwestern Connecticut, who had mostly restaurant accounts. And there were small grants available for COVID relief grants. And so we applied for those. I think about like, how can we connect the dots? Like, we're a small nonprofit. We have a grant writer. We can get funding. We can get these grants that maybe a farm can't get. They need to sell their product. We had partnerships with meal centers that needed food. We just need to connect the dots between the farmer and the meal center. The grants were $3,000, $2,000 of it went to purchase food, or $2,500 went to purchase food, $500 went to our team to be able to go pick up the food, package it, wash it, prepare it in the way that the meal centers wanted it to be delivered, and then get it to people. So that's where this project started. And then of course the farmers were able to get a lot of their accounts back. And so they didn't really need us anymore. So that piece of the partnership kind of went away. And I think that's also sort of adapting, maybe another word that I would include to partnership. Like, our partnership with those farms had to adapt because they didn't really need us to connect that dot anymore. But we, at the same time, had started gleaning from Stone Acres Farm. And again, that partnership with Stone Acres, they would call us whenever they had a bed of spinach that they had already, harvested it a couple of times, and they needed they were going to plow it under or put it to compost. Did we want it? Did we know someplace that would take it? So we would get those calls and we'd start gleaning from Stone Acres Farm. And then this past summer, again, with a small grant, we had funding to start piloting what it would look like to glean from other farms locally, and have those conversations about, like, okay, do you want us to come harvest? Are you going to have it in your walk-in? Like, what's the best way for us to support you? What days of the week do you need special training? And each farm is very different. There's some farms now that we have a partnership with 5 farms that we just go pick up crates and get it out of their coolers and deliver it. And there's some farms that they ask us to come and harvest. And so we'll need volunteers to do that. And so we're learning through that, through this process, what the partnerships look like with each farms. And then on the other side, in terms of donation, as many of you probably know, the meal center that we work with takes things in big crates because they cook scratch meals every night. The food bank that we donate to in Rhode Island needs everything packaged because it's provided for their customers as if you're at a grocery store. So everything needs to be individually packaged. So then we need to think about funding for packaging and the staffing for breaking that down. So it's very different for each organization. And this, by the way, is our micro farm. So we started managing a small space on our farm. This is Eric, who's one of our educators, and our interns who were started to grow food for donation. Those are some of the cucumbers that we donated. We also, because of, again, when we think about partnerships, is what can we bring to the table? So what assets do we have? Well, one of the things we have is access to students who come to us for volunteer opportunities. This is a group of high school students that volunteered with us once a week. We arranged our gleaning and our packing times around when they were coming, and it was an educational experience for them. So we hit what our partnership needed to be for them. We got the food packed, which was a staffing requirement that we needed, and get it off the farm, and then get it packaged and delivered. This is Eric delivering to the meal center. And actually he's bringing chicken from a food hub that's nearby, who was trying to sort of keep a farm in business, and he was buying all of their chicken, but a lot of the parts he couldn't sell. And so he had to buy all of the parts so he would sell what he could sell. And then we was trying to find places to donate. He didn't have the time to donate. Again, we had the time to pick up and donate because we were already doing it. I also got a call from a chef who was cleaning out a walk-in and had what he told me was 200 pounds of beef liver. Could I find a home for it? It turned out to be 400 pounds of beef liver. And I think the meal center is like down to the last few pounds. They did figure out a way to use it, but it was, that one I felt a little bad about because it was a little too much beef liver. And this is some of the greens that we harvested. But back to this partnership, I just want to mention one other piece of it. We are starting to think about also building a larder for that meal center. They're interested in preserving or fermenting food. for wintertime, our growing season is as short as many in the Northeast know. And so we're looking at ways that we can preserve those nutrients for wintertime use. And so we're partnering with them. And then that leads me to this next one, KojiCon. Does anybody work with Koji? Anybody know what Koji is? Okay. So koji is the Japanese mold that's used to make things like soy sauce or miso or sake. And so I'm going to talk like partnership connections here. So we have a chef who we work with who is a board member. He was doing a dinner on the farm. The person he wanted to come help cook with him wrote a book called Koji Alchemy. His name is Rich Shi, and he could come down and cook with him, but they didn't have money to pay him to come down. Would the Yellow Farmhouse pay him to do a workshop? So we did a workshop, we paid him. That was part of this sort of like partnership connection. It sold out immediately, which surprised me because I had never heard of Koji before. There's Rich on the right and Jeremy, who is his co-writer. And it was kind of amazing. I was like, oh, this could be a great program. Clearly there's an interest in Koji. Let's build on this. So I partnered with Rich and Jeremy and we said, let's do a conference. It would be in person, it would be in 2020, it would be about 100 people. Of course, that didn't happen. However, I had all this experience with live streaming through our teacher programs and said, well, why don't we just try doing I don't know, we'll do like a virtual conference. Maybe we can sell like 100 tickets or something like that. And we ended up selling, I think, 1,000 tickets last year to 63 countries. People from, the only state not represented was North Dakota. So this year we're going to get North Dakota in there. Otherwise, every other state. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we had people from all over the world joining us for this virtual conference, all stemmed out of this sort of organic partnership where we, Rich wanted to get the word out about Koji. He wanted to find a platform for his fermentation friends who were doing really amazing work. Again, we had the funding to be able to pay all of the speakers. And so our business model was speakers paid. Our tickets, we did a tiered ticket price because we also heard from the presenters that we wanted to make sure it was very affordable. So we had a $100 ticket for, you could pay 100, 50 or 20, whatever you wanted, no questions asked. And most people picked the $50 ticket. And it turned out to be this great model where I think it really helped to build this community where we had buy-in from so many people. And then the other thing that we did was we set up a Slack channel for this conference. And so we built a Slack workstation, I should say. We built a Slack community that is so active still, even after the conference ends. And so we just kind of like piece all these things together. And then we listen to our community members, we engage them as partners. And we have one of our Slack members who manages the whole workstation for us because he just wants to. And that is the sort of the partnership we have with him, and just kind of listen to what they wanted and made changes in real time to the conference to make sure we were adapting to what our community wanted. And it means we get to meet these amazing people around the world who present about Koji. And what we provide is not the expertise. So I am not a Koji expert. I am just, I think, a good facilitator and good at bringing people together. And that's the expertise that the Yellow Farmhouse brings to the table. Do you want me to, anybody want to ask any questions before I move on to another partnership? Yeah.
Did you use a marketing agency for KojiCon?
Not Instagram is the only way we got the word out. Yeah. Yeah. But I from the that one workshop that we did, the thing I kind of picked up on was just that this was a very engaged community and they were really interested. So I had a feeling it would sell. I did not expect it to sell the way that it did. Okay, so Kelp Harvest Week. Again, another walk on the farm. We happen to have a kelp farmer who lives in town. Stonington Kelp Company is the name of her farm. And she's growing kelp off the coast of Connecticut. And she talked to me about how she doesn't have a market for her kelp. It's a tough sell. Does anybody work with kelp farmers, or is anybody a kelp farmer in the audience? No. So it's an amazing product. It grows, it's harvested in like April, May, just as in the Northeast, everything on land-based farms is just gone for the most part. And we're just like waiting for the summer to start. And so the timing is really great. one of the things that they needed in that time period was a place to dry all their kelp. So that was like the initial start of our partnership. We said, well, we actually have space on the farm that's not being used because we haven't planted out this greenhouse yet. You can dry all your kelp here. So there's ways that we can sort of figure out what all of our assets are, and that the alternating season is a really great way to look at that. What they need is at times that we have, the space available, which would not be available obviously in the summer. So Susie, the kelp farmer, was talking about not having a market for her kelp. She was going to start something called Kelp Harvest Week. Would we want to partner with her on it? We paid for the logo, which was not something they had funding for, but I had money in my budget to build a logo. She did all the outreach to restaurants, and then we were brought on board to figure out how we wanted to create an educational campaign. So it's the kelp company, and then Department of Ag came on as a sponsor, Connecticut Department of Ag. And what we ended up doing was going back to that initial audience that I talked about, the culinary teachers. We now had an engaged audience of culinary teachers and said, would you want to teach about kelp? Is that something you'd be interested in? And if so, can we build some lessons for you? So we built 3 lesson plans that were like plug-in lessons with slideshows that had all the information for each of the lessons, recipes. And then we got a small grant to buy kelp from Susie, $2,000 worth of kelp, to package it and then drive it to teachers across the state. And then those culinary teachers who have tremendous expertise in cooking and are excited about new products and now had the information they needed, cooked for 3 weeks with their students. They cooked with kelp. They dried kelp, so they talked about processing and preserving for later in the season. I think this is a little out of order. I forgot. And then one of them made pasta with kelp and blanched kelp for kelp salad. So I think we worked with 25 teachers, and each of them have about 50 to 100 students each. So all of those students were then learning about kelp that week, and it was a great sort of marketing campaign, and we got a lot of press for it. This is another partnership that started with a walk. I know if you leave with one thing, just go for walks, go outside on walks with people and have a conversation. I met the owner of Spencer and Lynn when I went in to buy some wine, and just really liked the way he talked about his products and was like, oh, he's similar mindset. Like, he cares very deeply about what he does. Invited him to the farm for a walk. I was looking to build more adult programs. He was looking to engage with the community. He was a new business and wanted to meet more people. So we started laying out like what each of us had to offer and just starting with ideas. So I knew we had space to do programs. I needed money from those programs. It didn't make sense for me to do this adult program without it generating revenue. He needed an audience and a place to do programs. And we started thinking about, well, how can we connect his business to the farm? We have rye cover crops on the farm that were just starting to come in. I wanted to talk to these adults about rye and cover cropping. He wanted to sell his new rye product that he was bringing into the store. And so we started a program called Grains to Glass, or Grain to Glass. The first one was rye. He made a cocktail, he had some food, he did all of it. It was the easiest lift for me because he brought in the chef, he has a catering license. He bought all the food, he covered all the expenses. When the revenue, he also did all the marketing for us because he has a dedicated person to marketing, which I do not, and did all the ticket sales. So all I had to do was provide the space and the repost it on my Instagram to get new audience, and then do the education piece, which was a tour of the farm to talk about cover cropping and rye. And it was this amazing program because he got everything he needed out of it. He covered all of his expenses, and I made a little bit of revenue off of it, and I had very little work to do. So we're repeating that with a program about gin and botanicals in October. But he also has brought ideas to me that have not worked. Like, he wanted to do a dinner on, it was like Icelandic wine or something like that. And we were like not the right partner for it. It was going to be too much work. It wasn't worth my time. And so we just, we move on. So I think that dialogue is just a really, really important part of the communication with partnerships. Back to Stone Acres Farm. So again, I mentioned we pay a lease. for the space. The farm stand is this amazing partner for us because they have business, especially during the CSA season. So it's a great way for us to promote our programs. But when we have somebody at the farm stand promoting our programs and we do a tasting, it's a great way for them to sell that product. So it's again, just really thinking about all of the ways that we can benefit one another in a very equal partnership. On the right is a workshop that we did with a group of food service directors and partnership with the Connecticut Farm to School Network. They needed space. We wanted to increase our visibility as somebody in the farm to school world. And Stone Acres, wants people on the farm to learn more about Stone Acres. No fee for the space. They were able to do their workshop. We were able to connect with a whole new group of teachers and food service directors and build our partnership with Connecticut Farm to School. And it just sort of worked beautifully for everybody. And then looking for sort of, again, like these unique ways to find partnerships. So our wedding event, the weddings that the Stone Acres Farm does on the farm are gorgeous. And sometimes they want programming for the kids that are coming, for example. So we've set up, we've been paid by the couple or by the bride to do programming. And it's just a really nice revenue source for us. And it provides something that the farm can offer to their wedding guests. Does anybody do corporate programs at their farm? You do? Has they been successful in terms of?
I only did one after Maria with City Winery.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, so it's a business that I'm not on the fence about because I actually see tremendous value. It's just that it almost entirely went away during the pandemic, obviously. And I'm not sure like what the marketing dollars will look like for companies going forward. But retreats for corporate groups I think, have a great potential. And, again, the farm is our space that we can do these programs. The farm has the catering set up. They have the event business set up. And then we have the education side of it that we can be brought on as a partner for that. And we've done 2 or 3 that have been really successful. I also think, especially depending on what the group is. There's so many, going back to the museum education piece of it, there's a lot of metaphors that you can talk to with people in marketing or finance about farms, about siloing and about rotations. And you can talk about regenerative economies and regenerative agriculture and those connections. You can talk about partner growing and companion planting. There's a lot of ways you can bring what happens on a farm to a business model. And it's, when I think about my museum education background, you're using objects to tell stories and to create connections. And to me, the farm and the plants and the food that we're growing are just all, are all ways to make those connections. So this is one we did for a group called Buyer's Edge, which is like a food service organization. And we set up programming around the farm where we talked about seed diversity, soil health. And I think we also had something set up about honeybees. And so that was a great one to talk about community building. So just looking to see if there's water somewhere. My throat just got dry. Oh, thank you. Somebody have a question? Yeah.
Yeah, how do you do liability risk management between your partnership with bringing other food groups in?
Oh, thank you.
And the children, adults, whatever, between the
Stone Acres, yeah. We have liability insurance through our organization. Stone Acres has liability insurance. And then we, if there's food served, then there has to be a catering license and insurance from whoever's doing the catering because they don't have a catering license. So if they're booking it, it's their liability insurance. If we're booking it, it's ours.
So it's not shared.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
2 separate policies.
Are these like a one-day, like 9 to 5 kind of retreat?
Yeah, so this was a 1-day retreat, and usually it's for this one it was sold directly through the farm. So the farm sold the event. They brought on a caterer to do the lunch. The company wanted a lunch and event experience. We've done one with a local hotel that hosted an event. So that's another partnership area. We started building partners with, I think, 3 different hotels that do conferences to make sure that we knew that we were sort of a potential partner for experiences. So the hotel hosted the event. They had an event planner that we worked with. This was for a recent one that we did with, let's forget the name of the insurance company, the one with the alpaca, I think. Does anybody know? I can't remember. Liberty Mutual. Yes, thank you. Liberty Mutual was doing a retreat for their board members. Yeah, yes, like not surprising that that's what I remember. Well, I'll tell you why I remembered it. They asked if we could have an alpaca at the farm. And I think we're like, well, it's not really what we do. So, you know, they were looking for one experience for their client, so that a group of people could choose between a couple of different experiences. The one they did on our farm was sort of like a, I think we did, they did lunch and we did a cooking experience, like a harvest and cooking experience. They did make me, this is, I mean, just going back to sort of like funny things about working with corporations. I had to send them pictures of all of the ball jars that I was using for the, they did like a take home simple syrup, I think we did, and a take home like tea or something, something like that. And they wanted to make sure that all the jars were approved and looked exactly the same. And so sometimes there's just like a level of like detail that I had to, you know, respect as my partner wanted that. Okay. So recently did a fundraising event with a partner, 2 nonprofits that work together. Has anybody done events with other farms or other similar organizations? Yeah, I mean, and did they go well? Yeah, I feel like this one, it's all about expectations too. That would be another piece that I would add into that puzzle of words is expectations. This is the one dinner we do every year. I mean, for 5 years, 2 of them were during the pandemic, but it's our only fundraising event. I have to make money on this. Like coming from years of doing galas that never really make any money. They're just a way, you know, whatever, that this just had to make money. And so we partnered with Eating with the Ecosystem, which is another organization that focuses on sustainable fisheries, because we wanted to do a dinner that looked at our fishing industry and about ocean farming. What they brought to the table were these tremendous partnerships with local fishermen. So Josiah is there, Susie's the 3rd one in, is the kelp farmer. There's like 2 oyster farmers on the end that I see there. And so it brought a real authenticity to the topic, which we don't have. It's not an expertise that I could speak of, but they have that expertise. We brought all this event experiences. We do a really good job with our events. We have partnerships with chefs who were volunteering to cook for this dinner. And we sold tickets together, and, you know, our menu, and then the wine was all curated by another partner that they had. And so there's all these different like people that came in that we wouldn't have had access to because of that partnership. I'm looking at the, not the dogfish, but the scup. We had this back and forth. Has anybody had scup? It's a fish that's not heavily fished because it's, people don't know about it and they don't want to buy it, but it's something that is very abundant. And if we could switch and make that shift, it would be a good income source for fishermen. But we wanted to do dogfish, which is another one of those fish. We partnered with a local fish market, and you know, last minute she couldn't get the dogfish because there wasn't enough, because there's not enough demand for it. So we were starting to sort of also realize where our partnerships were really listening to, you know, part of what we could have done is be like, well, we have to have dogfish. It was on the menu. Like that's what we put, you know, instead we reprinted the menu, switched it to scup, and then told that story at the dinner to our dinner guests to explain we were going to do dogfish. We don't have enough demand in the marketplace for it. The fishermen couldn't get it. We had to switch the ingredient, and the chef had to also be flexible there. The initial switch was to something, I can't remember what he wanted to switch to. And again, he had to hear us say to him, we're not switching to that fish because this has to be part of the story, that we're using something that is not a typically eaten fish. And the end result of this was that it was a great partnership in the sense that we built all these new friendships. We were able to tell a really good story. From a fundraising perspective, it was okay. Like we had to split all of our revenue. We also split all of our expenses. And we probably brought in 90% of the audience, I would say, because of where it was. So, if I look at that partnership from just a financial perspective, I don't know if I would do it again. From a relationship building and community building perspective, absolutely. But my priority was fundraising for that one. So also keeping, setting priorities. Oops. And so I think this is the last partnership I wanted to mention, which is with the Narragansett Food Sovereignty Institute. So we were approached by a 5th grade teacher to build a series of lessons on that aligned with the social studies curriculum. And the way that social studies is taught in Connecticut, at least, it's like chronological. So it's like Native American and colonialism. Then I guess it goes up to like modern Connecticut today, right? And what we sort of learned very quickly, we reached out to the Food Sovereignty Institute, to some other friends in the Pequot tribe, and like it became very clear that they are asked only to ever talk about pre-colonial or Thanksgiving. And then they're not asked to participate in programs past that, and they're just bombarded at that time of the year. And we realized, oh, well, this is an opportunity that, as if like we wouldn't talk about what food looks like today and also talk about Native Americans today. It was this sort of like, blindness that when we think about chronological, that it's only then. And so, so we were excited to be able to build this partnership that incorporated the Native American and Indigenous people story throughout all 3 lessons, and partnered with the Food Sovereignty Institute. It opened up these doors for fundraising, which was amazing. So we were able to reach out now to the Connecticut Humanities, which was a really tough sell for us as a farm. They didn't see farming as a humanities issue. Just kind of crazy to me. But once we had this partnership, we all of a sudden built a relationship with Connecticut Humanities. We got a small grant from them to work on this partnership, but it opened the doors to all of these other grants that came through for capacity building and other areas, because we were able to make this direct connection. And so we're working with them to film segments for a virtual field trip for 5th grade students across the state of Connecticut. And in this case, really, again, very much listening to what is the story that Cassius and Dawn want to tell. How do they want to tell that story? And that is how we build our lessons. But partnerships, like somebody mentioned before, can be real capacity building. And at the end, we were going to look at what the words, if they changed our words. But if anybody does do presentations, Menti is a really good one. I've only done it virtually. So again, I'm not sure how to work it so that we can get that to get that link. But you can put in words and then it builds a word cloud that you can show at the end. So I had 2 other slides that I had added afterwards, and they did not get added to the drive here. But I wanted to see if anybody wanted to build out a partnership sort of in real time. But I would start maybe with some questions. Does anybody have questions about partnerships? Yeah.
Well, I had a question about in the start of deciding whether to do nonprofit or profit.
Yeah.
Was it before it was more educational?
So the board at the Stone Acres farm wanted there to be education, but did not want to run it or take on the risk because it doesn't make a lot of money. Or the education classes are expensive, and they can cover you can cover your expenses, but it's not always super profitable. So when they asked me to set up a nonprofit, I definitely thought about whether I wanted to do it as a for-profit or as a nonprofit. For me, to be quite honest, I wanted to be able to walk away one day. I didn't want to build my own business. I wanted to build something that lived well beyond me.
Right.
And that was my reasoning for doing the nonprofit route.
Another question I had is that easier to get the funding through grants as a nonprofit versus profit.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it requires a lot of work. 90% of my time is fundraising. And I spend a lot of time either writing grants or meeting with people for individual donations. The organization started with a $5,000 gift from one of our board members. Our budget's now about $330,000, gone up significantly because of the USDA grant we received for next year. But it's now about 50%, 45% from individual gifts, from people giving us individual donations. And then the rest is split between government, foundation, and revenue.
What's the percentage of revenue?
That is up to about 25 or 30% now because of KojiCon, which doesn't cost much and makes for us a ridiculous amount of money. Yeah. Oh, great. Well, I mean, okay, so ridiculous for us. So it's the revenue we get is about $50,000 from KojiCon gross, and our expenses are about $12,000. We pay all of our speakers, and of course, there's my time to run it, and then we pay for StreamYard and that's kind of it, really. But the revenue is from ticket sales, and we do have a T-shirt that people can purchase. And then we also we have a marketplace as part of that program. So we had about 15 marketplace vendors. It was $100. They got an Instagram story. They were able to go live with Rich on Instagram to share about their company. They got a post or a spot on our website with a link to all of their social media. And then we had marketplace days over the course of the 2 weeks. And if people couldn't pay the $100, because the goal was to support small businesses doing fermentation. If they couldn't afford the $100, it was waived. They could still be on there. So we also were really thinking about what our goal was, which was to be able to feature as many small producers as we could. But then we also had sponsorships that we sold. And we sold a few sponsorships to larger companies that were in the fermentation world. And they were recognized as sponsors on the website, and then also at, during all of the live streaming, which had, tremendous amount of viewership, because we also make those videos available for the full year. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Tim, and I'm sorry I missed the first part of your presentation. I'm hearing that you say that you're a non-for-profit and you rely on grants and helping other businesses, and your own fundraiser, you struggled to make that profitable,
Yeah.
which is fine.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, it was profitable. It just didn't hit our goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all of us as businesses and the businesses that you're working with ultimately have to stand on their own 2 feet and be profitable.
Yeah.
And so what's your advice? I mean, and we're all inherently good at doing our social contribution and keeping the price down and trying not to upset the locals and make sure everybody's happy. But what's your advice for a business to value their own product and themselves, and how to leverage up their financial worth to be able to put another $50 on the ticket?
Yeah.
And be profitable? What have you got a key thought on how to do that?
I think partnerships can really help with that, partly in like the storytelling, and like for the Eating with the Ecosystem dinner. I'm not sure we would have sold as many tickets, or people would have trusted us to do a dinner about fish without a partner who had that expertise. So I think the authenticity of the event and the storytelling is probably the most important part of it. And then the other piece, and I don't know if this model would work for food sales, but for the KojiCon one, I was given a lot of advice not to do the tiered tickets. Like, just charge $100. It's like, that's not that much money. Charge everybody $100 for this. It's a tremendous amount of content. You get 2 full weeks of workshops. There's 25 different speakers. You have this entire Slack community, and you get it for a whole year, and it's $100. But I knew some people would balk at that it was going to be too expensive. And so I did the $20, and I was also told, like, don't $20, like, you're just giving it away. And I'm telling you, most people pick the $50 or $100. because the option for the 20 was there. And because they knew the $100 was listed as, by paying $100, you're paying the true value of this conference and you're supporting others who can't afford to pay that. I don't know if that tiered model would work in other things, but it was like a game changer for me in the way that I price my programs, because I saw the mentality of people who, again, I would say 60% pick the $50 range. So I was able to upsell, to some people,
Yeah.
and then.
So it's a real emotional hurdle for businesses too. We heard yesterday in accommodation from Austria about increasing the value of your accommodation will actually get you more customers. And it's just realizing that self-worth.
Yeah.
So
and we have funding to pay. I mean, it's also increases participation. When I do a free program, let me go back. That's a good point, because I was going to talk quite a bit about assumptions. 5 minutes. Okay. Breaking down assumptions. So you go into partnership with assumptions like, well, of course they need this. Why wouldn't this partner do this for me? That is the biggest advice, is to list out all of the assumptions you have about your partner. The food donation centers, they're going to want all the food I can donate. Why wouldn't they want it? They have people who need food. Well, and then breaking that assumption down, well, no, they don't want all of that food because they actually have people donating from other places, or they don't want it because they know that their audience is not going to want the kohlrabi that I'm donating. They want the spinach bagged in individual things. So really saying them out loud, what your assumptions about your partner is, and then like checking yourself all the time with that. And I made that assumption early on with a partnership at a children's museum I was working at, where we were offering free science classes, and they were free. Why wouldn't everybody want to take them? Of course they should take them. They should bring us on to do it. And the school was like, we don't know you. We don't trust you. Why would we? They're free. They can't be worth that much if they're free. So I started charging for things because I charge for all my programs, no matter what. I always have the option to be free. So even our school programs have a fee. They're $200 up to $400. That's the real cost of them. But it says, if you can't pay this, email us, we will come up with something. And then we say, usually I say, like, what can you pay? And if it's zero, that's fine. But I do feel like there has to be the right charge for something, because otherwise it assumes it's not worth it.
I guess from what you're saying, my take home is, as us as a fledgling business relying on successful partners that have got the gin or the fish or the seaweed or whatever, that if you ask them to contribute, they're going to put full price on and make a profit on their sale to you to us for our function. So we got to put our full price on what we deliver.
100%. And to lay out what your real need for that partnership is. So with the liquor store in our town, they for a lot of the things that they've since done with us, they don't charge us the full amount. They do it all wholesale, or they'll donate some part of it.
That's relationship.
And that's relationship building. But for that event, we charged what that cost. They put exactly what their expenses were, exactly what our expenses were. That's what the ticket price was. But then in terms of the revenue, they weren't looking to make money on that, because that was something we talked about up front. So all the revenue that came from it after the expenses were paid came to us. So I think it's just really laying out with the partners and being really honest about what you actually need from that partnership. And if it's money, then that has to be stated up front as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
A couple of quick observations from things we've done. When you're working with a partner, do your best to talk up the partner in your marketing. If you say, we're working with so-and-so and they're the greatest, they've done this and that and that. First of all, you look better because you're working with somebody so awesome. You look gracious, and it's just your partner loves what you're doing. It's a great thing. We work with a local library and museum, and we both kind of know this trick, and it's worked very well. Another thing about naming, KojiCon is a great name.
Oh, thanks.
It's kind of like Comic-Con a little bit, and that's that.
Naming with, that's a good one.
Naming is huge. It's everything. And in that regard, how many of you ever eaten Patagonian toothfish? Okay, how many of you ever eaten Chilean sea bass?
Yeah.
Okay, they renamed Patagonian toothfish Chilean sea bass about 15 years ago.
Yeah, no,
So
for
the
sure.
dogfish and the scup.
The scup,
Who
I
wants to
know.
eat scup?
The dogfish in
I mean,
particular is a rough
you
one.
scraped it off. Well, scup, it's like you scraped it off the boat or I don't know.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's a good.
And the other piece of that too, I think, is the power dynamic in a partnership. And I think being very honest about that, when we first started, I had a lot of partners who were making assumptions about me, like, why wouldn't you do this? You need us. And I didn't really like, I felt that power dynamic and I felt like it was being played against me. And it's something to just be very mindful of, is understanding who has the power in the partnership and really what is that.
Hi, thank you. Myself, I'm just starting the agritourism side. I have been farming for a few years. I was very intrigued by the walk on the farm because I'm thinking of some, low impact, low risk things I could do as in the building stage. So could you share a little bit about the framework? Like, how long are they? Did you charge, or did you have different models?
Yeah, so the walks on the farm, and we do tours at the farm where we which have been like somewhat successful. Usually we don't charge for the tours, and we do them as just ways to get people to teach them about something else that's coming up. It's like a good marketing tool for us. But the walks on the farms I was talking about was with potential partners, that anytime I wanted a partner to, like when I met the folks from Spencer and Lynn, the liquor store, I knew I wanted to do something with them, but I didn't know what it would be. And so we just went for a walk and we chatted about, when did you move to town? What do you do? Do you ever go to farms, and really start just like minding for what the partnership is really what I was referring to in those walks, that I just think more happens outside on a farm in the space that you might want to do the program than happens on a phone call and especially during the pandemic, we did a lot of outdoor walks.
Okay.
And so that continued. But for the walks we do on the farm for tours, those I typically use as ways to sell other programs.
Got it.
People don't see, I have a hard time selling those unless we do a tasting with it and there's some sort of a food component, and then I can charge something for those.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. That's it. Thank you, everybody.